let me call on stage my panel. We are going to be talking about the impact of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, that's the term that's been used. Other people call it digital transformation. Others call it the digital economy. Whatever you want to call it, the way we all behave today, whether you're ordering a pizza, or you're trying to book your car for a service, or you're trying to pay for something in your bank, we are now all doing it through a mobile device, thanks to technology, and it's going to get better with things like 5G coming down the line. The question we are asking here is, to what extent is this digital transformation, one, accessible to as many South Africans as possible, and two, good for us? How is it good for us? Back to the dreaming president. Eh? How is it good? Or is it threatening jobs? We've just seen, I don't know if you guys saw the headlines from MultiChoice a week or so ago, that they were planning to retrench 2,000 people in their walk-in centers and their call centers, because people like you and I are no longer calling their call center when we need to fix our decoder. We're no longer driving to Randburg carrying our decoder. We're just doing it online and digitally, and that's affecting real jobs. What does that all mean? How do we deal with it? So please join me in welcoming on stage my panel. First up, he is a professor at the Graduate School of Business Administration at WITS, Professor Brian Armstrong. A round of applause, please. Thank you. Right behind him is the Chief of IT Solutions at our sponsor BCX, Vish Rajpal. Following Rich is the Research Specialist for Intelligence at the Technology Innovation Agency, Mr. Garth Williams. We also have a man who has a big job in this country. He's the Commissioner at the Competition Commission of South Africa, Mr. Thembinkosi Bonagele. And a lady with a very big job. She's the Managing Director of We Think Code, and that is Nyari Samushonga. Welcome, board members.
Hey there.
Have you signed the register?
On my way out.
Or was it a fingerprint for you? Did they do a retina scan that you were here?
Not yet.
Okay, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time. And I guess I think we're all quite aware, being in the world of business, of the theme that we're discussing and how game-changing it is, but also how scary it can be for many. And on this panel, I think we have all the key role players when it comes to this particular topic. On the one hand, we have an economy that's structured in a particular way. It comes with its, as the COO of Nedbank said, we were dealt the hand we're dealt. It comes with its construct. To what extent does this digital revolution give us an opportunity to increase competition? BCX, a leading IT business in the country. We heard from the CEO all the work you guys are doing. How are you grappling with this in terms of servicing clients? What are they asking for? From a business school perspective, and I guess We Think Code, what are the skills that we're going to need to get this right? And of course, when it comes to innovation and as a country, what's our strategy? How are we going to do this? Are we actually going to get that bullet train one day? And we actually have people who can operate the bullet train for the sake of being consistent with the theme of the president. But first, before we get to the questions I have for you, you know the theme. You deal with this at different levels with all sorts of emphasis and kind of specializations on the theme of 4IR and digital transformation. I want your own input and your own thoughts of how do you see this panning out? How do you see us dealing with it as a country? Commissioner, let me start with you.
Well, I think nobody really needs a definition of what's happening because we're all experiencing it. I think that's the first thing. For me, the critical thing, which is probably the most transformational, which leads us to call this revolution, is the speed at which it is happening, the depth. It's literally changing how we live, and that's why it's a first-hand experience. Even in the deepest rural area, people feel it, kind of thing. And I think if we look at it more closely, it's a fusion of technologies, and this has got huge implications on how we address and prepare ourselves for it. Nobody can really say is an expert in fourth industrial revolution, precisely because it's a multiplicity of technologies that are at play. It's a fusion. If you're going to operate a patient in the medical care environment, you need an engineer in the room. You need a medical specialist. You might even need an aviation expert. That's how diverse a range of technologies involved. But what it has done is it's disruptive. It's hugely disruptive, not only in companies involved, but in people. You've mentioned the issue of employment.
Yes.
It's displacing people. But also from a competition point of view, what we've seen is it tends to be a situation where the winner takes all, or at least takes the most. So there are going to be winners, and the winners are going to do very, very well. But the losers are completely out. So that's how we have experienced it. Let me give you just one quick example from my environment. Most of you would have seen the slide of what were the largest firms in the US in 2008. They were led by the oil giants. Within a space of 10 years, the top 5 of all of those were displaced by digital companies. In the European Union, I was looking last week, the largest penalties, in this business, we levy penalties.
Yeah, we all know about your penalties.
The largest penalties in the European Union in the past, from 2016,
Yeah.
the largest penalty was against Apple, 14.8 billion.
Yeah.
The second largest against Google. All top 5 of them were against digital companies. And what was the issue? The issue was protecting monopoly position.
Yeah.
All of them wanted to defend the entrenched position. It's
Yeah.
not people going around fixing prices, cartels, the usual stuff we come up with. It's entrenched companies defending their position amidst challengers who are coming in.
Right. And now, on the note, though, of competition, I'm interested. Do you see it then, this digital disruption, this ability to come up with solutions that could change the way we know the world? Do you think that's good for competition or bad for competition?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's very good. But there are conditions. The fuel that drives this thing is the internet. And we get access to the internet through the spectrum, the infrastructure, the technology.
Yeah.
So if you have equal access, equitable access to technology,
Yeah.
to infrastructure that drives this, you have a realistic chance of fighting, in this. In a battle where, as I've said, the losers tend to take most.
Absolutely.
So the problem we have is that we know in reality that there is inequitable access to technologies. There's inequitable access to internet. And until you fix those things, so spectrum, the price at which people can access it, internet and so on, are crucial if there is a realistic chance that new entrants will be able to challenge the incumbents. The rules also are quite important.
Yeah.
Because if you have a legacy of 100 years of infrastructure, it's going to be impossible to rebuild that infrastructure in a fast-changing world. As I've said, within a 10-year period, you've had a complete displacement of the top 5 firms. If the speed of change is so quick, it means that you need not only people with access to technology, but also access to infrastructure. So the terms at which people access infrastructure, share infrastructure, is very important, and that's set by the rules.
Okay. All right. Talking to the rules man. Vishal, you are in the trenches. What's your perspective?
Yeah, no, thanks, Andile. I mean, I think, let me start with the BCX's purpose.
Yes.
And I'll tell you why purpose is important, because in the digital economy, purpose is what drives it. So our BCX purpose is to reinvent the customer experience. And for us, I mean, the key aim is, as a company, is to start looking at our solutions. And really, if you look at our solutions and if you look at digital, it's about how do we look at the collaboration between technology and people and how that reinvents the customer's experience.
Right.
But not just there. We actually want to start looking at how we use that capability to reinvent the customer experience. And that, for us, is the purpose behind what we're trying to strive. Now, what would be our big challenges there? So if you look on the technology side, I think from a technology perspective, Andile, I think it's leading the way, and it's something that will survive and it will thrive. But as an organization, as a company with that purpose, we need to put a big focus on the skills, on the workforce of today and the workforce that we want coming in from tomorrow.
Right.
So when we look at the digital transformation and we look at it against our purpose, our biggest focus as a company right now is how do we foster and how do we see the impact of technology and people collaborating together.
Right. And how are you doing in that war? Because, before the prof and Yuri come in, the people that are dealing with skills at different levels, I guess, the one key theme of this 4IR has been, oh my goodness, where are we going to get the people that are going to do all this stuff? And that's why many companies, from SMEs all the way to corporates, they're exporting these skills, they're exporting these jobs. People are developing all these technologies in other jurisdictions. How are you guys doing it?
For us, I mean, learning is the key differentiator going forward now. So, if you think back to 5 years and you sat in a budgetary conversation, and learning was the last thing that you'd look at, where someone would actually say, okay, now it's fine, we can cut it down, or we can do it 50%. Today, learning is the most important priority that you'd put on the table. All your budget goes towards learning.
Wow.
And it's key. And it's key for two reasons, okay? If we are not going to empower our current workforce, we're actually going to lose the game in the digital world out there. And not just that, if we are not working with capabilities like institutions out there, the We Think coders, and again, I see these institutions not giving us certification, just giving us the tools to allow us to bring these capabilities into a real work environment. We've got to be constantly and continuously learning in order for us to keep at pace with the digital world. And that's really what we're embarking on.
I have to go up to that question of learning.
Yeah.
So that presumably is a little bit easier for a younger person.
Yeah.
Yuri's client.
Yeah.
It may not be that easy for a guy who's been at BCX or Telkom or wherever else, who was used to, I don't know, SAP systems and whatever.
Yeah.
And now, some young person says, hey man, there's this now new technology. And the guy's like, no. Where's the manual for our SAP system? Yes, this is how we do things.
Yeah.
Is that a big dynamic for you guys?
Yeah. So let me start up front. And let's say, for any individual, regardless of age, and I never use age as a thing, especially now that I've got a gray beard out there. But the ability of any workforce to learn, relearn, and unlearn is the differentiator, regardless of age. If you can learn, relearn, and unlearn, you can contribute to society and you can contribute to the workforce as long as you'd like. So for us, that is a key differentiator. Right. Also bear in mind, and if we get a chance and deal later, I'll touch on an example. Remember, what the digital economy will give us is not just the ability to play on tech. It might actually be analysts who don't need to actually understand the technology, but might create new business value. And really, that's the focus. So the workforce of the future, and don't assume it's just going to be a bunch of techies coding out there. You're going to need a lot of individuals that are going to look at different spheres of adding business value.
Absolutely.
The critical aspect, as I said to you, is any individual's ability to learn, relearn, and unlearn. And that will be the biggest hindrance or success factors in how we move forward within South Africa, within the economy,
right,
and even on a global scale.
Right. So that would be if you don't have the ability to learn, relearn, and unlearn. All right, Prof, your experience.
I mean, just to go back to the setup of the session when you were introducing to say, we see that digital transformation, the fourth industrial revolution is good, but it also has challenges. Let me just take a step back to that. So there's no doubt that the fourth industrial revolution, digitalization, call it what you will, is good for business. We're seeing that there's increasingly compelling evidence, and let me pick out just 6 areas where there's compelling evidence. Digitally transformed companies tend to deliver better customer experiences than their less transformed counterparts. That's clearly good for them and for their businesses. Secondly, we're seeing globally company mortality rates are rising, lifespans are falling. digitally mature companies mitigate the risk of the so-called mortality risk of businesses. Thirdly, as the Commissioner mentioned, we're seeing an increasing concentration in the digital economy. There's growing, compelling evidence that the digital economy is more concentrated than the historical economy, and that means you get a few big winners and lots of smaller losers. Digitally transformed companies tend to be the winners rather than the losers. Fourthly, there's evidence that those companies that have been able to transform their product and service portfolios to be relevant to the converged digital economy outperform their peers by an order of magnitude in terms of shareholder value. Fifthly, there's similar evidence that digitally transformed and digitally intensive companies deliver dramatically more shareholder wealth than untransformed peers.
Right.
And finally, there's incredible evidence that digitally transformed, so-called digitally mature companies deliver more revenue, more profit, more shareholder value than their less mature digital peers.
Right.
Anybody that wants to speak to me about this evidence, 5 years ago the evidence wasn't there. Increasingly the evidence is very real that digitalization is good for business.
So if you're not there, you are dying. You may just not know it.
You
but
might not die, but it's going to be tough. It's going to
Right.
be tough. Life's going to be tough. But I think to come back then to your question about the challenges, because the point is, so it's good for business, but what about society? Because we all work, but there's a lot of people that don't work, so what about the society that we're part of? And the issue is that digitalization is affecting society profoundly. And let me just highlight 4 areas. The first is that these waves of change that are washing over us are coming faster than the ability of society to adjust. Historically, they used to come decades and decades apart. Now they're coming half a decade or a few years apart. They're coming faster than the rate of the ability of society to adjust, and this leads to incredible alienation and a sense of dysfunction in the society that we're part of. Secondly, it's been mentioned several times, the nature of work is changing. There is huge displacement of jobs. In my class, literally, in the last month, I have had 2 students, talented, educated people in jobs who have been so-called RPA'd.
What does that mean?
They have been made redundant because of robotic process automation. A new term. I've been RPA'd. 2 of my students in the last month. And not only are people losing their jobs and their jobs under threat, but the nature of the job they do is changing dramatically. This is hugely stressful. Thirdly, the point that's also been raised, this whole issue of digital inclusion, digital literacy, and digital empowerment. There's nothing more disempowering at the moment than being digitally excluded. And digitally excluded in terms of, do you have access? Can you use it? Is it making an impact in your life? And how do we address that? And finally, all these issues around trust and privacy and the use and abuse of our data and social scoring and the sense of mistrust. So these, I've just mentioned 4, and there's many others that are causing stresses in society, so whilst it's great for business, if we don't deal with these stresses in society, we're going to have a fractured future.
Got you. We're going to go back to a lot of those issues that you raised there. Thanks so much for that, Prof. Yuri, we think code. We've heard a lot about you guys.
I hope we're doing good work.
Yeah, only positive things. What's your take?
Thank you, Andile. I think when I look at it with digital, as my fellow panelists have pointed out, it's here, it's real, it's not going anywhere. And the question is, what does it mean for us? I think one of the key things that we observe when we look at digital transformation is it often speaks to a change in method. So if we look at some of the large players in digital, if you look at things like Uber, Netflix, they don't introduce a new concept of market. Humans have been needing to be mobile for a very long time. Humans have been using some form of hailed transport for a very long time.
Yeah.
Netflix, we've been seeking out entertainment for a very long time. What's changing is the mechanism by which these problems are being solved. And those solutions are becoming digital. And so to the point of inclusion, my view is that a deepening of inclusion is good for business because understanding the problems we are solving is a question of inclusion. Your ability to understand the nuance of a problem is easier if you're closer to it.
Yep.
A digital world where you try to compete as an organization digitally, but your representation is not inclusive is problematic. What Netflix is doing is they're deepening an understanding of how do people interact with entertainment? How do I compete with alternative forms of entertainment? If no one in the room is interested in entertainment, how do you define a viable solution? If no one in the room needs a mobile solution because they've got a driver parked outside, ready to take them where they need to go, how does a construct like Uber come into your mind? And so inclusion is an important part of it. And I think if you look at this board meeting right now and its composition, this is one of the problems. And then when you look at within technology and working in technology, it turns lily white. And it turns lily white male. And this is a problem to the nature of solutions that South Africa can create if it does not have representation within technical literacy.
But Nyari, do you think companies understand that?
I think companies like BCX do, because they're a big supporter of an organization like We Think Code. I don't think this understanding is universal and deepened. And I think this is a critical thing that we need to start to speak of, which is if we go back in time to when reading was a thing for the elite, with technology, the literacy of technology is becoming a critical play in how an organization competes. And quite frankly, an organization should vote with their money. It shouldn't be difficult for We Think Code to explain to an organization that in order to compete in a digital economy, you need digital skills. And the nature of digital skills that you need to be diverse in a rich way, not just in an appearance of color, in an appearance of gender, but in exposure and experience. Yeah. I think the play of We Think Code is important in that respect, because what we're saying is, how do we look at the real situation in South Africa? We face it with a real set of material factors that are there. You were pointing out yesterday that South Africa historically has not been great at training and education. This has been a struggle in this economy for many years. Enter digital and a rate of transformation that is rapid. That problem then comes back to bear in a situation where it says, if you have been struggling with education traditionally, how do you struggle with education where digital literacy has become critical? And that's an important question for us to answer. And I think it's a question where if an organization cares about the capacity and its capability, they don't just vote with their money, they vote with their time. The people that are sitting in this room today make big decisions. Don't pass off the responsibility for training to a human resources department. Don't pass it off to a CSI department. We want to see CIOs, CTOs on the ground saying, I understand the threats to my organization from digital transformation if we don't get it right. This is the nature of what we're seeing in this market and what we need. We Think Code, how do we partner with you to create alternative pathways for education and training so that we have literacy of a workforce that has the capacity to build what needs to be built? The gentlemen who were building the solutions that are making the banks stand today, do they have the skill set to solve for a digital banking solution? Yeah. I would dare say their skills are now becoming limited. We talk of MultiChoice laying off people because we're not showing up in Randburg to say, oh, my decoder is not working. But that's the obvious skills gap that appears. What happens to the skills gap of the software developer? Is the software developer of 1960, 1970, 1980, who has risen into a CIO, CTO position today, really the person who alone can understand what this landscape is and needs? Are they ready for a young black woman like Nyari to come in there and say, if we're talking serious about digital transformation today, listen here, Baba, this is what's up. And I think that's really the difficult conversation that we need to have. All right. And so that would be my take on that.
All right, very quickly to provide everybody, all the board members context here, what does We Think Code do?
So We Think Code takes students, regardless of their prior education background, into a 2-year tuition-free program that trains them up to become software developers. How the program works is corporate sponsors like BCX, BBD, FNB sponsor our students to enter the program for 2 years. Over the 2 years, there's 8 months in the beginning of the program where they're on campus and training. Subsequent to that, there's a 4-month window where they go to the sponsor and do an internship within their tech department. They come back to campus, and it's another 8 months of intense training in software development fundamentals, and then thereafter, another 4 months of internship. Our corporate sponsors then absorb them into high-skilled technical jobs as software developers. We have filters that we use in the beginning to assess aptitude and attitude to succeed in our program. Right. And so the focus is, if the education system is not naturally setting you up
Right.
in a way where we can look at a certificate and tick, how do we build sharper filters to identify people
Right.
that have the aptitude to grow and participate?
How much
in
does
the
it cost to sponsor one student over the 2 years?
Over the 2 years, the cost to us is 150,000. The cost to a sponsor is 100,000 as we look for alternative grant funders that come in there and
Cool.
participate in that landscape.
Later on, I'll be taking some bids, so please prepare yourselves. If you need to text your FD, this is a good time. Garth,
Thank you, Andile.
let me come to you. Innovation. What is your take on this one, brother?
So I'm going to be somewhat controversial, but let me just start with the notion of long-term economic growth. It's not due to the usual factors of production. So it's not really due to labor, to capital, and land. There's a thing called total product factor productivity, which kind of is supposed to account for the scraps of what happens, but actually it accounts for about 70% of long-term economic growth. So it actually is underpinned by productivity improvements, which are actually created by technological change. So from a long-term perspective, innovation and technologies, but technological change, and I use that wording very specifically. Often the focus is just on this static technology nebulous, but it's the process of technological change that is important. And that process is actually underpinned by scientific, technological, and knowledge-based capabilities, skills. Okay. It's not about the technology, it's about the capabilities. That is the actual discussion that we should be having. So not that, it's really sexy to have it in the title, but underpinning that is people and what they're capable of doing.
Absolutely.
The controversial part is that I don't believe the fourth industrial revolution is a thing. I think it's actually, so I've actually, before we came up on stage, I tweeted a whole lot of stuff where you can read that. But essentially, the fourth industrial revolution is a recent construct of the World Economic Forum. The first one actually came out of Germany, 2010. They call it Industry 4.0. You probably know the German better than I, which is specific to the German context,
Yeah.
to their industry, to keep them as the leaders at the time in industry, the leaders.
Yeah.
They were thinking about the incremental next step. And then a whole lot of other countries got on the bandwagon, including the World Economic Forum. It also does exist because it is now high on the political agenda. And it essentially is created a point where we can grapple with the effects, such as you were saying, Brian, about there are positive and negative impacts around technologies. So this goes back to an economist called Josef Schumpeter, who you might have known the term creative destruction. It's a process of the old kind of coexisting with the new. Sometimes we see more destructive creation, actually. And I think digital technologies can be a perfect example of that. Its technology is not neutral, and specifically with digital technologies, you can have very quick change. You can have very big disruptive effects on the job market. And the jobs created may not be here. That's the thing. So it is not neutral. It is socially constructed. It is influenced by the political system as well as the commercial outlook. And so I think that is slowly changing because people and companies perceive value in sometimes very narrow terms in terms of profit. But if you conceive value creation more broadly and you think about communities, your customers, your staff, your suppliers, and your consumers, not only about profit. If you conceive value broadly, then I think you start to then you can then start to counter the possible negative consequences of technological change. So, what I like about the title, it says, developing South Africa's economy through inclusive technology innovation. But that requires us to be intentional. Because, for us to be inclusive, we actually need to think about the social consequences of a particular technology
Right.
beyond profit. we need to actually have given that our labor statistics are so poor, we need to have a developmental outlook. And so, the 55% that's been quoted is actually for the 14 to 24-year age group, if I'm correct, right? The expanded unemployment rate for that group is 69%, according to StatsSA's quarterly labor force survey. This is the situation we have to deal with. And so when we're looking at the young people, we really need to be very aware of the possible negative consequences that this could have beyond just making a profit. And just the takeaway, when I was looking through the quarterly labor force survey, I also came across a really shocking statistic. There's actually a category of people who are not in the market and whose daily activity consists of collecting water, wood, and dung. There are 4.2 million people in that category. That's shocking. So really, so as much as it can create value for companies, we really need to be very aware of the social consequences.
Let's pick on that for an open and frank discussion. And I want to start at the point of assessing for ourselves, or potentially if we were in a room where we could chart what the pitch is, what the sales pitch is, or whether you want to call it the fourth industrial revolution, whether you want to call it digital transformation, technological change. The point is, it's here. Okay? We're seeing the signs of how it's disrupting things. And my reference to the multi-choice example is, I'm sure the unions and the company have to deal with the employees, but it's clear to see, and it's perhaps, to your point, Nuri, is easier, is the thing we can see. How do we sell this? How is this good for us? Because it's here now, you see. We can't really wish it away.
The thing is, we actually don't really need to sell it because it's on the agenda. It's what we do with it. That's the next question.
Okay, your point?
He sold it. He sold it. All the benefits of these four companies are very clear. I think what most are grappling with is the societal impact.
Let's talk about that.
You can sell more products, sell more widgets, sell more services. It's about what happens to a meter taxi when Uber comes to town. That's the real social consequence of this. And I think what has changed, whatever you call this, what has changed is that data, if we were saying this is fueled by internet, then at the center of it is data. So the data companies collect has become so lucrative. And there are only so many companies that are able, firstly, to collate the data, and secondly, to commercialize on it. It's data that they gather from us. Your mobile phone, as you sleep, it knows how you slept. It knows as you wake up in the morning if you are going to need medication or you won't. So all of that data about your life, about your health, about your preferences, about what price you can take and what price you cannot take. Problem we have, which has got huge social consequences, is that data is owned by somebody. It's not the consumer who generated the data. It's a company somewhere that's dominating a market. And it uses that data to entrench itself and exclude everybody else. That is really the thing we have to grapple with. And that's why it's not a South African problem.
Indeed.
Because you have to agree on the rules around this data. Other people are more concerned about privacy. I don't want my data to tell to tell people where I was sleeping with whom. I don't. So those privacy issues, there are people passionate about that.
Yes.
There are issues around the ownership of that data. Do I have a stake on my data that I generated? We need rules around this. Right now, all of this data get taken, expropriated by somebody
Without
without
compensation.
and they use it to sell a product to me to get more from me.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying, we're getting into a situation where I think we need to redefine the rules, not
But
just in
Commissioner,
South Africa, but globally.
Some players are complaining about that. I mean, I've heard a few companies, particularly in the broadcasting side, where they're saying these over-the-top players, you got to regulate them somehow because they fly in here. I go online, I subscribe to Netflix. Newry's example. I'm paying some company wherever they are. I'm not sure if they're paying any tax. I'm told they're not. How do you even manage just the sheer size of this thing? These are global players.
I mean, one of the things that's on the table now is the sharing of the data and interoperability. So if you have all the data, let's use, for example, we know one of the gatherers of data in South Africa is Discovery through Vitality and other platforms. Now, how do you compete if you want to get into that space? What are the terms for you accessing that data? What we're saying is that I think we need to rethink the rules. I think you need a lot more transparency. For an example, if you are providing services and your service is the best as a bank, you should be prepared to share at least the data so that I know whether I'm able to provide a similar service or I'm not.
Right.
But your competitiveness cannot be the fact that you have collected
access.
data
Yes.
from customers over a period of 100 years. That cannot be
Right.
your competitive
All
edge.
right. All right. I still want us to focus on the societal issues. Any takers?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, just coming back to that, Commissioner, and I think society has got it wrong. So people believe that data is the new oil, but I guess that's not where the benefit of data is. Is actually what you do with the data. That's actually what's more important. Is what you create out of the data, how you improve society out of the data. Now, the more that people hold on to data thinking it is oil, the more they're going to accumulate data and do very little with it. The more that you can actually start democratizing data, the more that you actually allow data to be open out there with the intent to actually improve society, the bigger value you're actually going to get out of data. So my take on data, and it's a mindset shift, is how do we democratize data, bearing in mind all the procedural, regulatory stuff that we need to do, but do it such that it actually improves every single one of us, as opposed to using it from a manipulative perspective or a attack perspective. If we focus on that, I think we'll improve society. I think we'll create new business values. We'll create new business models that will come out, and we'll have new applications that we can not just even look within the borders of SA. We can even take out beyond the borders of SA.
Vish, how could it even possibly work, right? Let's dream for a second, right? Let's dream of our bullet train.
Yeah.
How could it work? How could it possibly be democratized?
Yeah. Well, let's think about it, right? So let's just assume that all the planes line up and everyone is kumbaya.
Yeah.
Well, a company like BCX and other companies out there will provide you the necessary infrastructure to allow you to do that. So technically, tick box that you'd allow to do that. I guess from a business perspective now, it's depending on the maturity of organizations and companies to actually realize that there is bigger value in how we co-create as opposed to what I do for me.
Yeah.
So if we can get through that, and if we can get companies out there to start exposing information and sharing information, think about this for a second. One of the biggest challenges in the last 10 years within an organization was what? Was information was kept in silos within an organization, so a company couldn't see the full benefit of pulling all information together. Big focus over the last 10 years. That's how BI, etc. started to proliferate. Take that concept further. Look at it today. Companies are holding on to information as much as they can do within their own silos, and the fact that they're not sharing that bit of information, they're not seeing the next level of growth, the next level of opportunity.
Which is collaboration.
Absolutely.
Prof, you want to say that way?
So just to come back, firstly, just a quick comment on your question about the over-the-top, people complaining about the over-the-top players. As an ex-telco guy, I would suggest that the reason that all our telcos are seeing 40, 50% compound annual growth in the amount of data they sell is demand driven by the OTTs. It's not demand driven by anything intrinsically that they provide.
They should be thankful.
So complaining about the OTTs is a bit like biting the hand that feeds you.
But they don't pay tax. And I think it's a fair point.
There's an issue there. But they are driving the growth of the demand.
For the data spend.
Let's
I
come back
understand.
to your question about how do we solve this from a social perspective.
Yes.
There was some very interesting research done across, I think it was 16 Latin American and 20-something African countries, which sought to understand why is it that women are slower adopters of, or adopt technology less than their male counterparts.
Wow.
And the issue, what people recognize then is the reason actually is it's attributable to differences in education, income, and employment between men and women in these emerging markets.
Yes.
And if you control those factors out, women are at least as comfortable with technology as men. But then the research suggests, conversely, that if you provide access and usage to technology, you can reduce the disparities in education, income, and employment. So now if we can take that and consider it in a broader context, that says in a South African context, given our disparities in income, education, and employment, if we can improve access and usage to digital technologies, that can be a means, and probably not the only means, but certainly a very important means to reducing our inequalities and disparities in income, education, and employment.
Yari?
I think I'll join Vision the Dream on the dream train.
Okay.
Because my sense of it is that with the democratization of data being critically important, if the user of data can have ownership and access of data, why can't the user be the one who decides who uses my data? So I should be, yes, I'm creating data that Discovery is using today, but why can't I decide that, hey, Discovery, the data you have on me, I am happy for Andile to use it for whatever honorable or dishonorable intents he might have.
Only honorable.
Only honorable. But the point being, essentially, you have a corporation that collects what is effectively my data,
Absolutely.
and then puts my data behind a wall that even I can't go back and reach or have limited access to. It's my business to decide. And so it becomes an obligation of, A, I should have access to the data, even if I don't give it to anybody else. But secondly, I should understand who I want to give the data to. There's a range of things that we do in the current context. Everybody has needed to be FICA'd and RICA'd and whatever else.
We can't.
We don't have a choice.
We don't have a choice. But my point
It's
on
his
it is
rules.
but my point on it is that that's essentially a set of questions around my data.
Right.
Someone is sitting with the piece of data about where I live. Someone is sitting with a piece of data about how much I earn. Somebody is sitting with a piece of data about my spending behavior, etc. And now a telco needs a slice of that data. Someone has it. Now I must go and I must print and I must take a paper and I must show up here. And this is the digital revolution that isn't being televised. But to me, the point is, data must be democratized. Data belongs to the person, who has created the data, the individual. At the end of it, there's always a human.
Yeah.
But then the other problem that I observe with it is that within and I think Justice Mogoeng was clear, that we need to have a mentality that rejects greed and embraces generosity and inculcate values of ethical leadership. To me, the problem that emanates is that in an economy such as ours, where we have this disparity of who's doing really well and who's really struggling, the competition for skills and know-how tends to lean very heavily towards large corporations.
Yeah.
So the individuals that would be going and creating a platform where data is democratized are actually, we're bidding for those skills against Discovery, we're bidding for those skills against BCX, against whoever else, right? And so what consequently happens is that the profit motive alienates what might be things that are beneficial for the greater good.
Yeah.
So things that might generate income benefits, even for other corporations, are locked into the individualized interests of corporates. So when an organization like We Think Code, for example, comes and says, our intention is to train young people to be software developers, I'm competing for the skills of a competent software developer to train students with who? Large corporations. And so we've got a situation where we are saying we want to move forward. To move forward, we need to democratize things. To democratize things, we need skills. But to have skills, we must compete for the skills in a market where the funds to pay for them, it's not even. And I don't know how to solve that.
Right.
I'm just, maybe sharing.
Sure.
Yuri, but just on that note, and that's,
Yes.
and that's why corporations like BCX has been right there from the beginning with the WeThink coders. I think we've pushed in excess of 300 individuals through the WeThink program.
Absolutely.
Most of them, we've taken them into organization.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why that's important, right? I still stand by organizations like WeThink coders out there are absolutely relevant in providing the tool sets to individuals out there. And we want that to continue.
Right.
Having organizations like BCX and other players out there must give you real life experiences. So when we do take these WeThink coders, we actually don't have a program for them. We take them and put them right into the business.
Yeah.
And there you have the experience to learn from the inexperience and,
Yeah.
and exchange ideas. And what you get out of that is absolute digital magic.
Yes.
And that's for us,
Digital magic.
we absolutely focused and really looking at academia and capabilities like the WeThink coders to give us that next generation of
Okay.
skills to
I want
actually
to
grow us.
bring in the audience, Bakath. You want to weigh in on the societal benefits?
Yeah, I'd actually like to answer your question around what do we do.
Yeah.
But before that, just to tag on to the conversation
Yeah.
around personal data. Essentially, this is a barter system. We give them our data, and they give us access to entertainment. So it's a very different mode of competition, actually, because it's non-monetary. Users are not being paid for it. Then there's the other perspective, is that we should be able to control and monetize our
Yes.
data if we need to. But just in terms of what do we
do?
do
Yeah.
with this narrative, so because it's so strong on the agenda. And so the Technology Innovation Agency is a fairly recent agency of government. We're public funded and we opened our doors in 2010. So if you haven't heard about us, don't feel bad. A lot of people haven't, but now you have. So what we do is essentially we use grant funding to develop technologies towards commercialization. Commercialization in that context is not only about making money, but also about having a societal benefit and improving people's livelihoods, right? So our big focus at the moment is on building partnerships with government and the private sector to co-fund interventions that will do that.
Yeah.
Build businesses, grow the economy, and improve people's lives. But I'd like to talk just about two initiatives that are happening on a national level that could be considered by the partners here. The first one is that about 2 months ago, the Minister of Science and Technology, then Minister, different now, she's not tourism, but she launched the affiliate center of the World Economic Forum's Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And essentially, that offers a platform and a network to other centers around the globe to firstly to participate in projects under consideration of things like blockchain, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, precision medicine. But we also, within those structures, need to have conversations about governance, about legislation, about values and ethics, and rules. So that is a platform that business can participate in.
How do we participate in that platform?
So it's hosted by the CSIR, but in the absence of a CSR representative, you can speak to me.
Okay, great.
Secondly, so that's more on the economic side because it's
Gotcha.
looking at, even though it's looking at sort of the social impacts, but on the social side, and the lady from Yes is part of this initiative as well, this is what the Department of Science and Technology, together with their partners, Microsoft Foundation, Development Bank of Southern Africa, and SafeLab, I think, is on board as well. It's essentially looking to that great need for the youth to become connected, but not only become connected, get information about where to get finance, where to get training, where to get access to technologies, right? There are so many disparate initiatives in the country. You've got Fab Labs, you've got M Labs, you've got maker spaces, you've got the D Labs that the development DBSA is going to be setting up. There's
Everyone's got an initiative,
okay,
yeah.
but they're not connected.
Yeah, they're not.
All right, and they're also not accessible to people. So what the DSD is conceiving is to build a platform to matchmake entrepreneurs and the youth via the platform to local hubs where they can start to grapple and respond to the fourth industrial revolution.
Okay.
And I hate using that term, but that's kind of
Yeah.
to help them out in this context.
You in government, Chief, get used to the term. It's a fourth industrial revolution. Audience, let me give you a chance as well. I'm pretty sure you got some burning questions and comments. I'm going to keep going around, particularly the people behind me. Anything from this side? No? Slow side of the class? Okay. No problem. This way? Yes, sir. I'm teasing. I'm just playing. A microphone, please, to the gentleman. Right here. Thank you.
Hi, thanks Andile, and thanks to the board members. Really interesting discussion and debate there. I think one of the things, the whole issue about the President's State of the Nation address and the dreaming part, I think we are agreeing that we do and we did need that dose of optimism and dreaming because we're coming out of these 9 wasted years. And I think, if you look at Kennedy putting the man on the moon, or even the ruler of Dubai putting up a port when people thought it would be impossible to do anything there. So those are the kind of big dreams that we do need. The question then is, and I think the one that he referred to in his response to the debate was the Kauleza. How do we get it going? How do we implement it? What can we do about it? And I'm wondering, is there a way that this can be, these dreams that he has identified can become national projects that all of us can be involved in, whether in the technology side, skilling side, etc. Thank you.
Great question. Thanks, Dr. Omar. There was a gentleman here also with the white jacket there. If you don't mind introducing yourself, sir.
Thank you very much, Program Director. The name is Rudy Peterson. I'm from the University of Johannesburg. And as you know, as a university, we embraced the Fourth Industrial Revolution. In fact, our Vice-Chancellor, we're honored to have him as the Deputy Chair of the Presidential Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission. So I think I just have a very quick one for the last speaker there. The Technology Innovation Agency would be very relevant for us, since we are rolling out and we see ourselves as the epicenter of the Fourth Industrial Revolution from an academic institution. So what I just want to understand, what kind of projects they do fund, Technology Innovation Agency. I just want him to expand a little bit. What kind of projects, at which angle will they be? And we'd like to invite him for a presentation to the university. Thank you very much.
He's coming to the university. That one I can commit him on. On this side, there's a lady there, also in a burgundy jersey. I heard TT talk about burgundy. Clearly it's the trending color.
I think TT said red because he doesn't know.
Hi, Chair. Well done. It is Burgundy.
Burgundy.
Burgundy, or what? Yes.
What's your name? Sorry, I think you
Ronald.
said
I'm Ronald Klein.
Ronald. Thank you so much.
I'm from a governance and company secretarial company. And Chair, I just want to say I think the company secretary is missing in the board meeting. But having said that, we're an outsourced service provider. And what I would like to ask the panel is, what should boards currently be discussing when it comes to data, IT, and all of that?
Great question. Great question. Yeah, let's take the whole round. Then we can wrap it all up. Yes, sir.
Let me bring a different question to you guys. I work with people. I'm a pastor. I care for people. I see there's a lot of technology that is coming on board, and people are getting frustrated. As much as the technology is advancing, social problems are going up. I find myself counseling them every day. But here is my question, simple question, especially to the gentleman who talks about innovation. I think early last year, Cape Town, we had a problem of water, yet there's a huge sea next to them. It still troubles me. Remember, I work with people.
Absolutely.
And people, they come to me for basic needs. We don't have water.
Absolutely.
And I'm sitting here. I had to make sure today I come, sit next to you guys just to read your brain and how you think. We still have basic needs in this country, not complicated issues. Water. have you ever been to Dubai as CEOs and directors? They only had two things, desert and water, and they've transformed their country. And today we go there on holiday. Singapore, it's just a small country.
Absolutely.
But they've advanced their country. We go there on holiday. I was looking at the square meters of South Africa. Huge country. And we are talking technology with this big land that we have in this country. I've never heard somebody talking about farming, agriculture. It's more about fourth industrial revolution. To me, it does not affect me. It just brings a lot of problems. People are divorcing left, right, and center because they're sitting in their rooms with their computers and all that and that. How do you help me to help you? Recently in Zulu-Natal,
yes, sir.
Global warming, people are dying. I'm running there to them.
Yes.
And I don't see you guys.
Yeah.
Only on the 27th, on the 18th Mandela Day. Would you please bring a balance into that, because it's not only the technical, but the social part. That's
Pastor, what's your name?
Chris Matebula. People
Chris
Matter
Matebula.
Foundation, from People Matter Foundation and Hope Restoration Ministries.
Thank you so much,
That's
Pastor.
what I do.
Pastor Matebula. The issues are here, gentlemen and a lady. Who wants to go first?
Well, I got two, so let me...
You go.
Yeah. Thanks for the question about what TIA does and what we fund. The check will be in the mail. So, as I mentioned, we're a public funded organization, and we were created essentially initially to try and leverage off the knowledge created in the country. So there's knowledge creation, that's the research activities that happen at universities. And we need to utilize that knowledge for public goods and to make money, etc. So TIA was created to essentially fund what they call the innovation chasm, which is the gap between an invention and commercialization. So we look mostly at local research. We identify promising commercially viable local research, and we fund technology development. But having said that, the technology is only one part of commercial success, and so often there are broader factors that come to being. And so, but primarily we look to local research and try and commercialize that. We also try and support and strengthen the local innovation ecosystem. So we have a program called the Technology Stations Program, which is co-hosted by universities of technology across the country, which is essentially a walk-in service where a youth or entrepreneur or even big business can come in, accessing the expertise of that university of technology, whether it's to do some standards testing, whether it's to do product development, to do whatever. So we help the system in that fashion. More and more, we're also becoming involved in different forms of innovation, such as innovation in the public service, grassroots innovation, inclusive innovation. We've got like a Living Labs project. We're funding the installation of really cheap Wi-Fi in Mankosi in the Eastern Cape. 25 Rand gets you a month voucher, uncapped, unlimited voucher. We're still working on the business model, but we've collected the project has connected about 13,000 people. It's giving some income to the community. It's connecting them. And they essentially, they're searching for jobs and training opportunities, not primarily for entertainment.
Got you.
That's the one question. So you can go to our website or you can talk to me afterwards.
And you're visiting the university, so
clearly.
Yes, you can move on to the second one, sir.
Second one was primarily about water and about.
So let me frame the question, Rafa, as I understood it, because it's an important question, and I'd like you all to weigh in on this one. I think what Pastor Matebula is saying is that this construct of this fourth industrial revolution seems to be very technology focused. It's a thing you play on your phone, you're on your computer, you're on Twitter, you're with your Nyati. It's all sorts of problems for the world, because now he's trying to keep families together because there's Instagram and WhatsApp, and the guy didn't lock his phone, and right? And there's people dying with floods down in Durban because of climate change.
Yeah.
And people are dying of no water in Cape Town. There's a receipt there, he's confused. He's going, but there's all these problems. You people are talking computers and cell phones. What's the link? And I think that perhaps goes to this whole digital thing. Is it something that's all inclusive, or is it something for techies and computers and cell phones?
So, Alan Reyes wrote a brilliant column a few months ago about this, from this, looking at exactly this issue. Everyone talks about this fourth industrial revolution, but people are dying, or it's not relevant. And so he's actually coined a term called For My Reality, 4MR, which essentially looks at addressing local problems with local solutions, harnessing technology. Okay. So an example is, and unfortunately they're in liquidation, is a company called Empty Trips. What they do is they use AI and machine learning. They've created an online platform. So if you drive a truck down from Joburg to Durban, the truck might be coming back empty. You can sell that space in your truck, all right? Brilliant idea. So it's a local issue because there's lots of trucks on the roads, too many probably, but that's looking at local opportunities and using local mindsets to solve that problem.
Okay.
So let's just, just to quickly touch on the water issue, because water is not primarily it's not technology where the problem lies. You don't generally fix things with hard technologies. It's more about the social technologies. It's about how people respond in a system. It's about the municipalities that might be risk averse or have low capabilities or have restraints on public funding. So in certain areas, the technology is not the solution.
All right. Nyari?
Responding to
Yes.
Pastor, I'll just start there. I think you raise a really important point, and I think it actually in a way speaks to the issue of inclusion. I live in the suburbs, and the suburbs now have WhatsApp groups, and mine is particularly a chatty one, and recently there was the issue of the Santon water that we were going to have low pressure, and all my neighbors were up in arms. And I think one of the things that we see with a lot of social problems is that the magnitude of the problem and how it gets addressed is an issue of the priorities of the people who make decisions. Santon without water for a day or two is like, it's a catastrophe, yeah? It's like, oh my goodness, they're saying not only we'll have low water pressure, and we couldn't cope. We just, my neighbors were collapsing, low water pressure. There'll be water, it's gonna come too slow. What should we do? Should we fill a bucket and put it there and use gravity to make it come down quickly? It was a crisis. And so what we're seeing with this is what you describe, in my opinion, is an issue of inclusion, which is that when the people who sit at a table to make decisions about directing funding and solving problems do not experience the same problems as everybody in the society, you see that disparity.
Yep.
So you hear a lot of noise and focus coming from the people who have that problem, talking about the problem. So if my biggest problem today is low water pressure, we are going to, and I'm the one who's in power, we are going to solve a low water pressure problem when less than 10 kilometers from my house, someone has not had money for months. And so I think this is one of the problems we're seeing with technology.
Yeah.
And so what I think is the solutions to that partly are about the inclusion in technology and in solutioning. One of the appeals I would make to the pastor is, as we think code, when we are trying to recruit people into technology and into software, one of the things that happens is that young women, for example, don't think that this is a place where they should go and work. And the communities where they are influenced are not they're whispering accountant in their ear, they're whispering doctor in their ear. They need to also whisper technology in their ear. Because what we need to start to do is have conversations where people with both influence and capability are close to the problems on the ground. When you look at something like M-Pesa, which is maybe old news now, that took off, part of what made M-Pesa really effective was that there was a real problem around moving money between the unbanked. And then the problem gets solved at a level where people who know a smartphone can't work, access to an ATM can't work. What does work is a certain kind of phone that can use USSD.
Okay.
And I think that's a critical part. And then if I can respond to the lady in the burgundy, which I
Yes.
think touches on this, which is the question of, so what should be
What should
discussed
boards-
in the
yeah,
boardroom?
yeah.
I think one of the things that I see that happens in boardrooms, essentially around the conversation of technology, is that people who are board members need to start to take responsibility for understanding technology and have a vocabulary around it. Gone are the days where you sit in the boardroom and you have your board pack and you delegate the responsibility for technical decisions. Or you come out and you give your press release and you say, oh, we're going digital, but you have no construct
Yeah.
of what does it mean for this organization to be effective, impactful, and a good citizen as it relates to technology.
Okay.
So I think board members need to start to become educated and literate in matters of technology so that when they say they are directing money to technology,
Yeah.
they are capable of holding their foot
Right.
soldiers accountable to effective technological interventions
Right.
that are responsible, that don't damage the climate, that don't alienate people that the pastor is talking
So-
about,
so they
but
must-
take everyone along.
So they must learn, relearn, and unlearn.
Yes, they must
All
do
right.
that.
Commissioner, before I wrap with the two
You
gents.
know, Andy, I was in an part of the audience when the Vice Chancellor of VETS said that the fourth industrial revolution is about the people. And we thought this was so insightful, we gave him a round of applause. And then the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg spoke and said, the fourth industrial revolution is about technology.
You were so
Said-
confused.
He said, if you don't understand technology, you have no chance. So we thought it was so insightful, we gave him an applause.
They're both right.
Okay.
The thing is, it's about both.
Yeah.
And I want to come close to what the pastor was saying. It's about technology solving people's problems. And when it comes to the impact on society, I think this is where we all need to be very alive. It's the responsibility of government to also protect the weaker in society. So whilst the big ones are battling it out,
Yes.
who is there to look after the losers? This is really the debate perhaps we didn't have. I think that there is an agency probably missing, because if you have efficiency that's going to be brought about an e-hailing platform, Uber or Taxify, you've got a whole host of people who will be displaced by that.
Yes.
Metered taxis.
Yes.
And they are going to be so frustrated they may even turn into violence. We know this. Not just in South Africa, but in many parts of the developed
They
world.
did.
Because I think what happened is that governments failed to protect these sort of losers. So I kind of feel like there is an agency that's missing. You're going to find this in a variety of industries. So it's about how you manage this transformation.
I hear what you're saying.
So your multi-choice people, we should have known this 10 years ago, 5 years ago,
And we should have then
prepared them
planned.
for change.
Okay.
You know, so I think that's really quite important. SMMEs are also a very big part of this. Fortunately, some of the initiatives around, for example, democratization of data speak to that. We are now talking as regulators, especially in Europe, in banking, for example, there is talk about open banking, where people can put their information in a platform, consent that it be there. You tell them what kind of service you have. You tell them how much you pay for that service. So the banks, all of them equally, can have access to that information, and they literally can bid for that client.
I
So
see.
that you're trying to make sure that
Right.
at least there's a chance for the weaker, who otherwise wouldn't have
I
that
see.
capacity to
Right,
collate all
right,
of that
right,
data
right.
to participate.
Thanks for that. That's very insightful. Fish.
Anile, thanks. I think Pastor Matubula seems to be the topical conversation there. And I'm not going to even attempt to answer on the water crisis. But and again, I'm also not going to try and sell BCX, because I think the logo has been out here. But I come back to the purpose of BCX, and it's a purpose that we take extremely seriously. When we say about reinventing the customer experience. So when we start looking at how we're measuring ourselves, whether it's providing service to a municipality or providing services to a large retailer, we want to figure out, and we are getting measured on, have we done anything in terms of improving service delivery? Have we done anything in terms of improving the real cost to a consumer? So I'd like to say, from our purpose, where we're going is we're actually trying to see is how impactful we are down to the grassroots level. And I mean, that's key for us, and we're going to be living that and measuring ourselves going forward on that. We've actually never had a chance to even have a technology discussion. And I know you mentioned RPAs, and I thought to my colleague here, I may take the next 2 minutes and give you an example of what we've done at RPA. And again, you know, I think at the onset is that if organizations and enterprises start looking at AI or 4IR as a way to reduce cost, as an opportunity to take cost out of the system, I think that's where you're going to lose the trick around the benefits of technology. And if I could be topical, and I'll bring it right home to BCX, you know, we had processes, repetitive, qualitative financial processes that was running in our organizations. And we introduced this RPA, so robotics process automation. What is it? It's a piece of software that can do a repetitive task. That's what it was. And we went on to the entire back end of BCX, and we went in and we've implemented this technology. But before we did that, we actually went to the controllers and the clerks that actually do that work, and we brought them along on the journey. And we said, guys, as part of this initiative, we're not going to go and hire analysts out there to come and look at how we do reprocess engineering, how we modernize that. You guys have got the ability to do that. Come in here, meet the techies here, and actually work together as one team. Let's talk about an inclusive ecosystem that you're trying to create, right? What came out of that? Well, we managed to automate a lot of those processes. We've actually taken staffs who were clerks and financial controllers who were really bored with what we were doing, actually, who actually said to us, thank God I've got exposed to this RPA technology, how can I do more? So we've trained them as analysts now to actually work with our pre-sales capability and go to market to companies that actually are doing this type of financial process, and you be the sales arm for that. You be the guys that actually do the analysis work on that. So the concept for me, from an AI perspective, I think over the long trend, over the next decade, I think AI will create a lot more jobs than it will destroy. I think the focus must be on the rate of creating business value, which will outpace the rate of this task automation that will take. Our key aim, and talks to the lady in the burgundy side, is the continuous learning factor, right from the board level down to the new intake coming into your workforce, and creating that continuous culture will be the key differentiator that will not just let you survive going forward in the digital economy, but will ensure that you thrive. And that's really where we must focus on.
Thanks for that example as well. I mean, it certainly gives me a lot of hope. Prof?
So maybe to respond to one or two of the points. So firstly, is it a business thing or a people thing? I think there's no question it's both. But let me put it this way. There is no question that without artificial intelligence and big data and the Internet of Things and robotics, et cetera, there would be no fourth industrial revolution, no digitalization. We wouldn't be having this conversation.
Absolutely.
But having said that, if we think about 4 of the top 7 of the top 10 global companies, Amazon, Facebook, Alibaba, Tencent. They are 4 of the top 10 companies by market cap. Their tech's great, but their success is primarily due to the business model and the way they relate to their customer base than it is fundamentally about the tech. So digitalization will affect everybody. Therefore, the conversation can't be a tech-based discussion. It has to be a social discussion. It has to be a political discussion. It has to be a business discussion. It has to be an economic discussion. And that brings me to what should boards be discussing. And there's no question that they should be discussing digitalization, but it is a business discussion. It needs to evolve from a tech discussion to being a business discussion. It's about how can it work for our business. I think the other thing that's critical for boards to be discussing, to talk about this inclusivity, and I think it's already happening very widely, is to move from a narrow shareholder view of success and value to a broader stakeholder view of success and value. Companies fail for broadly 3 reasons. They miss changes in the market, they live beyond their means and build up mountains of debt which they can't service, or they fail because of failures of ethics and scandal. And it's that last one that's actually the biggest cause of company failure and distress. I think that's getting a lot of focus in South Africa at the moment. What digital does is it accelerates the spread of the bad news of corporate failure and ethics, and it amplifies the impact
Absolutely.
So boards are having that discussion, but it certainly is a discussion they need to have.
Thank you
Finally,
so
to also end with the pastor, if I
Yes,
may.
you have to address the pastor.
He mentioned Dubai and Singapore.
Yes.
What did they have in common? The first thing is they certainly had vision in bucket loads. They had no shortage of vision, which often when it was first articulated, people said, what? So they started with vision. The second thing they had is a very strong focus on skills, relevant skills, skills development, continuous learning, enablement of the workforce. But the third thing they had was a ruthless focus on execution. And for me, that does have to, it's not, the commentary I've heard on SONA is, oh, we can't talk about vision, we have to talk about execution, or vice versa. It's not either or. Of course we need vision, but we can't stop there. It has to get to execution as well.
I want to say hallelujah on that. Thank you very much to my panel.